Hello, welcome to the Sweet Sparrow Knits podcast. My name is Julie. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Sweet Sparrow Knits. And you can find my hand-dyed yarn in my shop at sweetsparrowyarns.etsy.com. It has been quite a long time since I've podcasted. I wasn't honestly sure if I was going to come back and podcast again, but I've been watching a lot of podcasts lately and it kind of made me think, oh, I miss that. I miss being part of that community. So here I am. I'm going to consult my handy dandy notebook here. Oh, you know what? I forgot the first thing I was going to talk about. I'll be right back. It's quite a gloomy day today. It is gray and rainy and very nice weather for staying inside, which is what I'm doing today. I don't think it's affecting the lighting too much. I think it actually makes for quite nice lighting, but I guess we'll find out when I'm editing. So I guess we will go ahead and jump right in to a finished object. I finished this, I think in December. It's my most recent finished object. I haven't been finishing much lately. I've been starting a lot though, but we'll get to that. So my finished object, I was going to say first, but my only finished object is the ranunculus sweater. Oh, I love this sweater so much. It is the ranunculus pattern by Knit Cafe Midori. I saw this sweater and I desperately wanted to cast it on. So this is knit in one strand of my yarn, Sweet Sparrow yarns, in my nuthatch base, in the Pajama Day colorway, and it is held together with a strand of sugar bush yarns, drizzle silk and mohair base in the pink puddle colorway. I absolutely loved knitting this sweater. It went so quickly. The texture pattern on the yoke is a lot of fun to knit, and it looks a lot more complex than it is. It really is just sort of slipping stitches over a number of other stitches. And then it has that adorable eyelet flower pattern, and then a little bit more in the slip stitch pattern. I felt like this sweater really zoomed off the needles. I was using size 10.5 needles, and it went very quickly. It is a cropped sweater, and it's quite boxy, as you can see. So I actually wasn't sure whether I could pull off a cropped boxy sweater, because I do have quite an hourglass figure, and sometimes boxy things tend to just kind of hang off me. And I wasn't sure this was going to be the most flattering, but I've figured out since then that having it be cropped actually remedies that issue, because then even if it is quite boxy and my figure doesn't show on top, it does show off my waist. So I find this to be a really flattering sweater, and I love wearing it. And it has these very long bell sleeves that are then gathered into this I-cord cuff, which I thought was a really beautiful way to finish it, because it's a thick enough I-cord that it looks like a separate piece, the way that it would be if it was a sewn top. I did actually block the sleeves just a little bit too long. I think the next time that I block this sweater and, wash it, I'm going to lay it out in such a way that the sleeve is not quite so long, because between the natural sort of stretch factor of a superwash wool and the fact that I tend to knit sleeves a little bit past where a pattern tells me to, because I do have quite long arms, and most sleeves end up being bracelet length on me. But I actually would have been fine knitting the length of sleeve that was suggested in the pattern for this sweater. But live and learn. I still absolutely love this sweater. I wear it all the time. You can totally see that I didn't weave in some of my ends. Whoops. Sorry, not sorry. I wanted to wear this sweater to a trunk show that I was doing at the Naked Sheep on Staten Island, and I had finished it up just a couple days before, and I blocked it, I think, the morning before the trunk show. So I wove in my visible ends, and then I kind of didn't worry about the rest of them. I think that might be the only two ends that I didn't get to, though. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh no, here's some more. I'll have to go back and weave in these ends. Oops. Yeah, I really loved how Pajama Day worked up into a sweater. You can see that it has these beautiful variations in color and little speckles of a darker purple. I love this sweater. I love how it turned out. I love wearing it. And I can definitely see myself knitting another ranunculus sweater in the future. Maybe one that is a little bit less cropped just for me to wear around the house. Which seems a little silly, but I really loved knitting it and I would love to knit another one. Perhaps in a more rustic yarn, like I think Brooklyn tweed would look absolutely beautiful in this pattern. So maybe that's what I'll try at some point. I'm just gonna grab some water. Oh, I can show you my glass. It's really cute. So, my brother and I, oh, hello. Hi. Ooh, don't like that. That's creepy. My brother and I have a tradition where every holiday he tends to get me something bird themed. And this started when I was maybe 14. It's very hard to show a transparent object. My camera does not know what to focus on. Okay, I think we're good. I'm hoping that if I get out of the frame, it will focus on the glass. Well, I think you can probably see it well enough. There. So these are adorable Charlie Harper drinking glasses that my brother got me, and there are 4 different ones, all with different designs, and I love them. Works in progress. I really only have one work in progress that is not a long-term whip like a blanket, so I will show you that. This is the Grace cardigan by Jane Richmond, and I am knitting this in Quince & Company Finch, which is their fingering weight base, in the Carrie's Yellow colorway. It's a beautiful sort of buttery gold yellow. I really love it. It's a gorgeous color, and I'm really enjoying knitting this sweater. It has a mesh lace yoke detail at the back, which there are some mistakes in here. You can kind of see where the lace switches directions in a few places, but I think once it's blocked out, it'll be fine. I don't think anybody's going to notice that. And it also has these lace panels in the front. I have obviously not blocked this yet, which is why it's curling quite a lot, because it is a stockinette body, but it's got these cute lace panels in the front. I'm working on my second sleeve. It is on magic loop, which I've found a little bit fussy. If anyone has good recommendations for, I guess, in the 9 to 12 inch range of circular needles that come in larger sizes. For instance, I'm using a size 4 needle to knit this sweater. Please let me know, because I would really like to be able to knit sleeves kind of without stopping, and I don't enjoy using double points. So perhaps small circulars would be the way to go, but I've had a hard time finding small circulars that are not strictly in sock sizes. But despite that, it is moving along very quickly. I have about maybe an inch and a half before I start the ribbing. No, that was totally wishful thinking. It's a lot more than an inch and a half. 2.5 inches before I start the ribbing. On my second sleeve, I have finished the first sleeve. That'll speed right along. I think I can finish that later on today. A few modifications that I made. I did do twisted rib for the bottom of the sweater and for the sleeve cuffs, because I find that for me, twisted rib is, it looks a lot neater. When I knit ribbing, one leg of my knit stitch always seems to kind of skew off to one side, which I find really distracting, and I like the look of the sort of neat twisted rib, but I've never knit twisted rib flat before. That was a slog. It didn't occur to me for some reason that when you are knitting twisted rib flat, you also need to twist your purl stitches. So that was not really that fun, especially because when I started knitting the rib, I was over at my boyfriend's house and I only had my Luca needles with me, which I absolutely love. They're probably my favorite needles besides carbons, which will probably always be my favorite. But trying to knit twisted purl stitches on wooden needles that don't have super sharp tips. They have sharper tips than a lot of wooden needles that I've used, but they're by no means as sharp as the carbons tips. And trying to knit twisted purl stitches with them was exasperating. Whew, it's a little warm in here. I have my windows open, so I hope that the noise isn't too distracting, but I live in an apartment building. I live in a pre-war building, and it's beautiful, and I love my apartment, but the heat in here is a little much sometimes. There's a little knob on the radiator that you can twist to close it, but it really, for some reason, the one in my living room just doesn't become less intense no matter what you do. So it's a little toasty in here, which in some ways is fun because when it's cold and snowy out, it's very luxurious to enjoy the contrast between it being so cold outside and being warm enough inside that I'm in a tank top and shorts. But it's not great for podcasting. I'm a little glowy. Again, it's been a really enjoyable knit, and I can definitely see myself knitting more of this cardigan. I don't think I swatched though. I have a sneaking suspicion that I just decided I was going to start this project, and that's what I did, because when I try it on, it is definitely a bit snug around the chest area. Everywhere else fits fine, but my blessing and my curse, it is tight on the chest. So I think it'll be okay. I generally either wear my cardigans only buttoned with one button, or I wear them open. So I don't think it should be a hindrance while I'm wearing it, and hopefully it'll block out a bit after I'm done with the sleeve. Before I put on the button band, I'm going to block it and take a look at that. And if I need to, I can always add a little bit of width to the button band. So I think it'll work out. The button band is so cute. It's garter stitch, which I think looks so rustic and sweet on a cardigan. And I have buttons for that cardigan. These were actually the only thing that I intended to purchase at Vogue Knitting Live. You'll see how that turned out a little bit later on. That's not what happened. But I got these beautiful wooden buttons. I bought them from the Nitty City booth, and they are by Favor Valley Woodworking in Henniker, New Hampshire. So I have 6 that are made out of peach wood and 6 that are made out of yew wood. They're so sweet, and I had wanted all of the buttons on the cardigan to be the same, but they only had 1 card of each of these, and these were the 2 buttons that I really loved. So I haven't decided yet. I purchased them with the intention of alternating because they are quite similar. They're just a little bit different in size. So I think if I alternate them, it will give them sort of a cute, quirky, as Jacqueline would say, wabi-sabi look. But I'm not sure yet. I'll place them on the cardigan once I have the button band knit and see how I feel about it. I need to go into the city Monday, I think. So if need be, I will head over to Nitty City while I'm there and pick up another card of probably the peach buttons because they're so petite and adorable. But we'll see. I may really like how they look alternated. Okay, my next work in progress is a new one, and it's something that I did not think I would ever start. I like when other people knit them, but for me it just wasn't something that I found enticing until I saw Nicole from The Gentle Knitter knitting her Cozy Memories blanket. And she is doing very small squares. My squares are not that small, but because I am quite a tight knitter, they're not large squares either. So this is the teeny tiny start of my Cozy Memories blanket. It's so cute. Oops, you can hear a horn honking. There's horns honking, there's dogs barking. What can you do? And I am knitting this on a US size 3. I'm using my Carbons needles. And I am doing the center double decreases that Danny from Little Bobbins described in her podcast, but I'm not angling mine to come out of the center or anything. They're just all slanted one way. Okay, my last work in progress has its own basket. And this is my granny stripe blanket. It's so big! I love this project. I haven't been working on it a lot lately because I've really been on a sweater kick. But I would really like to finish this granny stripe blanket in 2018. So what I'm working on now is adding all of the colors from my advent calendar, the Sweet Sparrow Yarns advent calendar. I'm working on adding those into my blanket right now so that I have a big section that's just advent minis. This is going to be so cozy, which to be honest is part of why I haven't worked on it. As I mentioned, it gets so warm in here that the idea of having this draped over me while I work on it is just not really feasible. But hopefully as the weather warms up a little bit outside, the very aggressive heat will tone it down a little bit. And finally, I have a spinning work in progress. I have not spun in quite a long time. I've been extremely busy, and I have quite a large stash, so in a way I haven't really wanted to add more yarn to my stash by spinning it. But that obviously doesn't do anything for my fiber stash, which is also sizable. And I find spinning so soothing, so I really wanted to start it. I'll get around to knitting whatever I spin eventually, and yeah, I'm trying not to have stash guilt. But this is what I am spinning at the moment. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, look at that. That is a dream. Those colors are absolutely stunning. There's a few shades of gray. One is more bluish, one is more of a purple gray. This gorgeous dusty rose color, a mauve, a beautiful soft green. Oh, I love this. This is absolutely beautiful. Ooh, this is the fiber that I'm spinning from. Oh my goodness, it is so beautiful. And this is from Created by LCB. This is her Queen's Court colorway, which I believe was a one-of-a-kind colorway, and I was lucky enough to snag 5 braids of it. It is merino. What is this? I can't really remember the blend right now. I'll put it right here. But one of the fibers in here is rose fiber, which is a cellulose fiber similar to bamboo or tencel, and it just gives it a beautiful shine. And of course, I love the idea that I'm spinning with rose fiber. I find that so romantic. So I've got five 4-ounce braids, which should be plenty for a nice cozy sweater when I'm done with this. I think it's going to be beautiful plied too. I think it'll just be subtle and gorgeous. And it has some gold stellina in it, which is so pretty. I forgot to mention that I have been keeping my Grace cardigan in the sweetest bag. I have a lot of absolutely beautiful project bags, but this might be my very favorite. This is from Gorgeous Jewels of So Sweet Violet, and she made me this bag in a swap, and it has the sweetest little pink mermaids on it and a little bit of lace. It's a drawstring bag. It's lined with this pink ticking fabric. Oh, it's just beautiful. I was knitting on my Grace cardigan at the beach last week in Florida, so it felt very appropriate to have it in a mermaid project bag. And it even has a little ring for attaching a progress keeper, which is very helpful. And Jules put this adorable little mermaid scale charm on it. It's so sweet. Jules is just so incredible about detail. Let's talk about what's next on my needles. I am going to be casting on the Tegna or Tenya sweater, and I am going to be knitting that out of Sweet Sparrow yarns in the Hummingbird base, which is a 50% non-superwash merino, 50% silk base in the Blackberry Mousse colorway. I love how Blackberry Mousse looks on my Hummingbird base. I think it just looks so delicate and beautiful, and it has such a gorgeous sheen to it. I'm very excited to knit this. I did one swatch. I believe the recommended needle size and the pattern is a US size 3. I am quite a tight knitter, so I went up to a US size 4, but it's still going to be too tight. I did this tiny baby swatch, but I was getting 30 stitches over 4 inches. Hello. There we go. I was getting 30 stitches over 4 inches instead of the recommended 22 stitches over 4 inches. So that is obviously quite a difference. So I am in the process of swatching again on size 6 needles, and I think this will give me a gauge that's closer to what's in the pattern. I don't mind if it's a little bit tighter than what's in the pattern, because the size that I'm knitting, I don't necessarily want the full, I think it's 8 to 10 inches of positive ease. I think with my body shape that might be a little bit overwhelming. So I don't mind if it's a little bit tighter, but obviously missing 8 stitches every 4 inches is going to be too much of an impact on the finished size. So I'm currently swatching on size 6 needles, and I started this swatch on my Knitter's Pride Royale needles, which I enjoy very much. They are wooden but with metal tips. However, I did order a set of Carbon's size 6 interchangeable tips because I think the knit for togethers in the pattern are just going to be too challenging with a needle that is slightly less sharp than the Carbons. And I don't mind this on larger gauge yarns, but for a fingering weight yarn, the Royales have this little hole in the tip. Let's see if I can show you. There, right there, I believe. It's hard to tell, and I don't want to take my hand away because then it'll focus on my face. But on a fingering weight yarn, I do find that that I feel that little hole when I'm knitting, and I just find it uncomfortable. So I am going to be using the Carbons for this project. I would love to finish my swatch for that. Let's say tonight. I love to finish that tonight. So that I can block my swatch and cast on. And I am keeping the yarn for that project in this absolutely adorable project bag that I got at Vogue Knitting Live. Look at that little mouse on there knitting under a poppy. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. This is by Mum and Son, which is from, oh, I hope I have her name right. I believe it's Heidi Bischoff. And she had a booth at Vogue Knitting Live. She's primarily a shawl pin maker, but she and her son, who is a graphic designer, have collaborated on the Mum and Son project bag. I couldn't find these anywhere online to purchase, but it seems like she is at events relatively frequently, so maybe they only offer these at events. But that's one of the project bags that I got from her. And then I did get another project bag from her as well. And it's a little knitting hedgehog with blackberries. Oh, it's so sweet. I love it. The yarn that is in here, just as a quick aside, I'm not going to be casting this on immediately. And in fact, I am considering rethinking my pattern choice for this yarn because I'm not sure that it will be a good match. But I've got, I think, 10 skeins of Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the postcard colorway. And I purchased this to make a Mazzy cardigan, which is sort of a longer, drapey, open front cardigan with beautiful sort of mini cable details. it's a gorgeous sweater design. The reason that I am unsure now about whether I want to use this yarn for that project is because the yarn that's originally knit with has some alpaca content, and obviously alpaca has quite a lot of drape and stretch to it and grows. And I think that the Brooklyn Tweed Shelter may actually be the opposite in terms of having drape and giving itself length. I think that the Brooklyn Tweed may be a little bit more inclined to want to spring up because it is a woolen spun and it's very lofty. So I'm not sure yet that that's what this is going to be, but I have 10 skeins, which is plenty for almost anything that I would want to knit with it. So we'll see. I love the color. I know that I will knit something with it. I just am not sure what yet. Should I do a stone cutter? Would that be crazy? I could join Katie from Inside Number 23's Wong Along. Ooh, that's a thought. Maybe I'll do that. The other thing that I purchased at Vogue Knitting Live, I was very much enabled by Ellie of the Skein Deer Knits podcast and Skein Deer on Ravelry and Instagram. One of her favorite Norwegian yarns had a booth, or I guess they were being sold by someone who had a booth with a lot of Norwegian yarns in it. So I did purchase a sweater quantity of yarn, which was not in my plan, but it was there, it was perfect, and I decided to go for it. So I bought 6 skeins of this Fennel Garn by Rauma, and this is a 2-ply fingering weight. This is silly. I'm looking for a color name, and then it suddenly occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to read it. I wouldn't even be able to tell what the color name was, but here it is. So I bought 6 skeins of this beautiful warm gray. It's definitely a brown toned gray, which I love. Obviously, it's quite similar to my sweater. The tone is not as warm. This is definitely a gray toned brown, whereas the yarn is a brown toned gray. But I find myself reaching for this cardigan all the time. And this was just, I think it was from Old Navy. It's just their basic cotton cardigan, and it's one of my favorite pieces because it's so easy to throw on. The fit is really good. So I really wanted to have at least one hand knit sweater in a similar color, and I'm going to try to achieve a similar fit. So I will be knitting the Foxglove cardigan by Kate Davies. I'll pop in a picture. So the gray, brown, gray will be the body color, the main color. And then I bought these 4 beautiful contrast colors. So I'm going to have this beautiful icy blue as the background color for the yoke. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently than the pattern in that I only want to use one contrast color for the stems and leaves of the foxglove flowers, and that will be this beautiful deep olive green. And then for the blossoms of the flowers, I would like to alternate these 2 colors. The purple is coming off quite a bit brighter on the screen than it is in real life. They both are, really. Let's see if it adjusts if I take one off. That's a little better. It's definitely a soft mauve color. And then this beautiful sort of mustard yellow. So I'm very excited about that. That is in my future knitting plans. So before I start talking about more life-oriented stuff, I did want to tell you about my trunk show schedule coming up. because I do have several trunk shows coming up in the next couple of months. So on Sunday, March 4th, I will be having a trunk show at Chelsea Yarns in Red Bank, New Jersey. It should be a really great time. It's part of their 5th anniversary celebration. I'll have a special exclusive 5th anniversary colorway for them called Birthday Girl. So that should be a lot of fun. It's going to be really cute. And then Saturday and Sunday, March 10th and 11th, I will be at the Naked Sheep in Staten Island, coming back for another trunk show there. If you haven't been to the Naked Sheep and you're in the New York City area, I would highly recommend it. It's a lovely shop, and the knitting groups that meet there are so much fun. I met so many wonderful people. It was just a very, very positive place to spend 2 days the last time that I had a trunk show there. I really felt accepted very quickly, which was wonderful, because as someone who's introverted, coming into an established knitting group and hanging out with them for the day, and of course I'm having a trunk show, so I'm answering questions about yarn and helping people pick colors and all that sort of thing, but there are lulls where I'm just kind of sitting and knitting with the ladies who are knitting at the shop anyway. So it was a really great group, and they made me feel very welcome, and Jacqueline and I had so much fun when we were there last time. Jumping forward a few months, on Saturday, May 19th, I will be having a trunk show at Frame and Fiber in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, which should be amazing. Paige, who owns Frame and Fiber, is very creative, and she always has beautiful projects, beautiful displays, and I love that in having a framing shop and a yarn shop in the same space, I feel like it acknowledges the art of knitting, and that makes me really happy, so I'm very excited to have a trunk show there. Alright, let's get into the sort of life stuff. I'm trying to think of a better name for that. If you have any ideas, let me know. Or any name really, because life stuff is not a segment name, that's just a topic. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about why I stopped podcasting and why I have started podcasting again. I am a very self-critical person, as I think a lot of artistically inclined people are, and I had a very hard time watching myself for the 45 minutes to an hour of a podcast, which if you have a podcast, you know that the editing takes quite a bit longer than the finished product in length. So I had a very hard time doing that. That's pretty much it. I became very busy once I switched to being a full-time indie dyer, which is, I can't even tell you how much I love that I get to do what I love all day, every day. It's the best. But I think in some ways I used being busy as an excuse to not podcast, because it was sort of procrastination by perfectionism. And I'm really trying to get past that, because I missed podcasting. So I was watching Melody from Bee Mandarins. I recently became a Patreon of hers, or I became a patron of hers on Patreon. And I've been going back and watching all of her previous videos, and it really inspired me that you can have kind of a more relaxed podcast and video format, because as much as I love talking about what I'm knitting, and sharing with you this way. What's going on here with this hair? Okay. Alright, there we go. As much as I love sharing with you on video, it isn't something that comes naturally to me. I find that my strengths lie naturally much more in taking photos and taking videos of other people or of what I'm doing, and not necessarily being on this side of the camera. I'm working on it, but it does not come naturally to me. So I was really inspired by the way that Melody works in videos that she's taken or photographs. And I think what I would ultimately really like to do, I'm in the process of moving my shop off Etsy just because there's not as much flexibility as I would like in terms of layout. I don't like that orange color of like the Etsy logo. I don't like that. It does not go with my colors. So I am in the process of moving off Etsy. And what I would really like to do would be to have sort of a journal page on my own website that can function as both a place where I post my podcast videos, which then of course will link to them on YouTube as well, but where I can also sometimes write blog posts because I love writing and I love taking photos. So I think that's what I would really like to do ultimately. I haven't decided yet how often I'm going to be podcasting. I'd like to do it every 2 weeks. I think that would be a good schedule because I would have enough knitting progress to make it make sense for me to show it to you. And once a week is not realistic with my schedule. So let's aim for every 2 weeks. We'll see. It may be once a month, but I hope it's every 2 weeks. Once a month feels like a long time. I feel like I would basically just introduce a project and then show you the finished object the next episode. And I would like there to be some discussion of the progress, not just started, finished. So that's it about podcasting. In other news, I got a new tattoo. I got my first knitting related tattoo, not super recently, but back in November. And I love it so much. I went to Maria Leone. She was visiting a shop in Brooklyn, and I got my sparrow tattoo from her, I think 2 years ago now. And I think she's an incredible artist. She is so talented, and she always, she really takes the time to make sure that she understands what I have in mind, and then she really transforms it into something that will work well in a tattoo. Okay. So I'll insert a picture of my tattoo. It's so cute. I love it. That is on my left thigh. I now have large tattoos on both thighs, which makes me really happy. I really find my tattoos to be empowering because, as most women do, I think, just based on the culture that we're raised in, I do have some body image stuff, and I find that getting tattoos and putting this beautiful art on my body makes me feel really good about my body. It makes me feel like, yes, this body is worth decorating, this body is worth showing, and it just is a really positive experience for me. You may have seen that Jacqueline from Brooklyn Knit Folk came with me to get that tattoo. And you may have seen that I was knitting through most of the process. There were a few times when we got sort of into the upper inner thigh area that I had to put down the knitting and do a little, you know, like Lamaze style breathing. But overall it was a really good experience. Like I said, Maria is incredible. She's a very delicate artist in that she doesn't go like very deep into the skin. She uses the smallest needle that she can. I really love her work, and I would highly recommend her. So let's do a little bit of watching and listening. So what I have been watching. Yesterday, Rob and I watched a movie called Kedi, which is about all of the street cats in Istanbul, and it was amazing. I mean, of course it was amazing. It was a movie about cats, and Oh, I loved it so much. um, the street cats in Istanbul seem to be very much a part of the culture, and it was just a very wonderful, touching film. Um, it told the stories of both the cats and the people who have come to care for them. So I would highly recommend that. It's available to rent digitally on Amazon. It was great. I've also been watching the Olympics, or more specifically, I have been watching the figure skating part of the Olympics. To be totally honest, that's the only part that I have any intention of watching, but I watched that. Obsessively is too strong a word, but I watched that with great enthusiasm. So I've been watching the figure skating and knitting while watching that, which is just so cozy, makes me so happy. And then I have one other recommendation that I think I'm going to save for next time, but I've also, as I mentioned before, I've been watching Melody from B Mandarins. I've been watching her Patreon videos and really enjoying those. And then I've also been watching a new podcast, which is called the Fiber Tales podcast. And it's a very, very beautiful podcast. If you enjoy Melody, or if you enjoy Nicole from the Gentle Knitter podcast, or Little Bobbins, and frankly, of course, we all enjoy them. They're wonderful. So if you enjoy those podcasts, I think you'll really enjoy the Fiber Tales podcast. So I highly recommend that as well. As far as listening, I listen to a lot of podcasts because when I'm dyeing yarn, I am in my kitchen dyeing yarn for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time, and I find watching something gets too distracting, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. And 2 audio podcasts that I have been listening to are the Wine and Crime podcast, which I really enjoy true crime stuff. And the Wine and Crime podcast is great because it's 3 friends who discuss true crime, and then every episode they pair it with a wine that either the name or the label or something about it kind of corresponds to that crime. And I actually don't really drink wine. I don't really drink alcohol in general, but I find it so interesting hearing about the different wines and what makes a certain grape become a certain way when it's fermented. It's very interesting. And the 3 girls who are the hosts are hysterically funny. I really enjoy that podcast. And then kind of in the same vein, I have been listening to the podcast And That's Why We Drink, in which one of the 2 hosts, Em, she drinks milkshakes. That's what she drinks as her comfort drink. And she tells like a ghost story or a paranormal story every episode. And Christine, the other host, drinks wine, and then she tells a true crime story. And I really enjoy this podcast. Again, the hosts are very funny, but I did manage to scare myself silly. I was working very late at night, right before I went on vacation to Florida, because I wanted to make sure I had everything ready for the shop and everything ready to send out before I went on vacation. So I was up very late, and I was listening to the And That's Why We Drink podcast, and let me just tell you, ghost stories are a lot scarier when it's dark and you're alone and you're a little sleep deprived. They are a whole lot scarier than they are when it's bright outside and you're rested and you can just sort of be like, oh, haha, ghost story. So yeah, I really alarmed myself a few times. And I believe that's all I've got for you for this week. I'm going to spend the rest of this rainy day knitting and sewing and just having a really cozy rainy Sunday at home. It was so wonderful to talk to you, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye. I'm sorry, I know this is not mature, but I can't help laughing every single time that I have to say sugar bush drizzle pink puddle all together in one clumpy like that. Oh dear. Sophisticated humor.